The royal transport cut through the darkness of space like a silver blade. Princess Hen stood at the observation window, watching the distant stars drift past. Her blue skin glowed softly in the dim light of the cabin, and her silver eyes reflected the endless void before her. She was the heir to the Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy, and she was bored. The journey to the diplomatic summit had been uneventful. Her guards stood at every door, silent and watchful. Her attendants waited nearby, ready to serve her every need. Everything was perfect, controlled, and utterly dull. Sighed and turned away from the window. She had been raised in the grand palace of Prime, surrounded by luxury and protocol. She had learned the history of 1,000 worlds, studied the languages of dozens of species, and been taught which races were worthy of respect and which were not. Humans, she had been told many times, fell into the second category. They were a young species from an unremarkable planet called Earth. They were primitive, emotional, and lacked the refined culture of the. They were tolerated in galactic society, but never truly welcomed. She had seen humans before, of course. They worked as laborers, cargo haulers, and low-level traders throughout the Outer Rim. They were small, fragile creatures with strange, flat faces and only 2 arms, had never spoken to one directly. There had never been any reason to. The ship shuddered suddenly and grabbed the edge of a table to steady herself. Warning lights began to flash across the cabin walls. "What is happening?" she demanded. One of her guards rushed to the communication panel. His face went pale as he listened to the reports coming through. "Pirates, Your Highness," he said. "The Syndicate, they have disabled our escort ships and are moving to intercept us." Felt her heart begin to race. They were notorious throughout the galaxy. They were brutal, merciless, and feared by everyone who traveled the outer regions. Their leader, a warlord named Commander, was known for kidnapping wealthy travelers and holding them for ransom. Those who could not pay were never seen again. "Get me to the escape pods," ordered, keeping her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. The guards surrounded her immediately and began moving toward the lower decks. The ship shook again as weapons fire struck the hull. Could hear screaming somewhere in the distance, followed by the harsh sound of metal being torn apart. They reached the escape pod bay just as a group of soldiers breached the corridor behind them. The guards turned to fight, shouting for her to run. She climbed into the nearest pod and hit the launch button with trembling hands. The pod shot away from the transport ship, spinning wildly as explosions erupted around her. Through the small window, watched in horror as her royal transport was torn apart by enemy fire. Her guards, her attendants, everyone she had known since childhood was gone in an instant. The pod's navigation system was damaged. Warning messages flashed across every screen, and the small vessel began to drift without direction. Tried to remember her emergency training, but her mind was clouded with shock and grief. She managed to activate the distress beacon before the spinning of the pod became too much. Her head struck the wall, and everything went dark. Far across the asteroid field, a small cargo ship called the Drifter moved slowly through the rocks. At the controls sat Jake Carter, a human man in his early 30s with tired eyes and calloused hands. He had been hauling medical supplies to a mining colony when the attack began. He had watched the distant flashes of light and known immediately what they meant. Pirates. Bad news for everyone. Jake had learned long ago to mind his own business. The galaxy was a dangerous place, especially for humans. Most species looked down on his kind, treated them as barely better than animals. Jake had served in the Terran Defense Force once, had seen friends die in border skirmishes that nobody in the wider galaxy cared about. He had left that life behind to become a simple cargo hauler. No glory, no heroism, just honest work and quiet solitude. But when the distress signal appeared on his scanner, he hesitated. The beacon was coming from deep inside the asteroid field, far from the battle. Someone had survived the attack and was calling for help. Jake rubbed his face and cursed under his breath. Every instinct told him to ignore it. The pirates would be searching for survivors. Anyone who answered that signal would be putting themselves in terrible danger. He thought about his mother back on Earth, about the stories she used to tell him when he was a child. Stories about doing the right thing even when it was hard. Stories about courage and kindness and the importance of helping those in need. "Damn it," Jake muttered, and turned the drifter toward the asteroid field. Navigating through the rocks was difficult and slow. Jake had to use all his skill to avoid collisions as he moved deeper into the field. After nearly an hour of careful flying, he finally spotted the escape pod. It was small and badly damaged, drifting aimlessly among the asteroids. Jake brought the drifter alongside and extended the docking clamps. The pod locked into place with a heavy clunk, and he moved to the airlock to bring the survivor aboard. When the airlock opened, Jake stopped and stared. The person inside he could tell by the blue skin and the elegant features. She was young, probably no older than he was by human standards, and she was wearing clothes that looked more expensive than his entire ship. Then he noticed the symbol on her shoulder, a golden crown surrounded by silver stars, the royal seal of the Empire. Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not just any survivor. This was someone important, someone whose rescue would bring attention, questions, and probably a lot of trouble. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the unconscious princess. He could still leave her in the pod, disconnect, and fly away. No one would ever know he had been here. But Jake Carter was not that kind of man. He lifted the princess carefully in his arms and carried her into the ship. As he laid her down on the medical cot and began treating her wounds, he could hear the distant rumble of pirate engines searching the asteroid field. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. Opened her eyes slowly. Her head was pounding and every part of her body ached. She was lying on something soft, a narrow bed in a room she did not recognize. The walls were metal, covered with pipes and wires. The air smelled of oil and recycled oxygen. This was not her royal transport. This was not anywhere she had ever been before. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed against her shoulder. "Easy," said a voice. "You took a bad hit to the head. You need to rest." Turned her head and saw the speaker. Her silver eyes went wide with shock and disgust. It was a human male with brown hair and tired eyes, wearing simple work clothes stained with grease. He was sitting beside her bed, holding a medical scanner in his hand. She pulled away from him immediately, pressing herself against the wall. "Do not touch me," she hissed. "Where am I? Where are my guards?" The human held up his hands and stepped back. His face remained calm, showing no anger at her reaction. "My name is Jake Carter," he said slowly. "You are on my ship, the Drifter. I found your escape pod in the asteroid field and brought you aboard. As for your guards, I am sorry. I saw the attack. I do not think anyone else survived." Felt her chest tighten. Her guards, her attendants, all the people who had protected her since childhood, they were gone. She was alone in the depths of space with nothing but a human for company. "This cannot be right," she said. "There must be someone else, someone proper. A human could not have saved me." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Well, nobody else is here, just me." Looked around the small cabin, searching for any sign that he was lying. But there were no other crew members, no other voices. The ship was quiet except for the hum of the engines. "The pirates," she said suddenly, "though are they still out there?" Jake nodded. "They are searching the asteroid field. They know someone escaped and they want to find you. I have been keeping the ship powered down as much as possible to avoid detection." Felt fear creep into her heart. She was being hunted by the most dangerous pirates in the sector, and her only protection was a single human on a cargo ship. This was a nightmare. "You should have left me," she said coldly. "A human cannot protect me. You have only delayed the inevitable." Jake met her eyes without flinching. "Maybe, but I heard a distress signal and I answered it. That is what decent people do." did not know how to respond to that. In her world, people did not risk their lives for strangers. Everything was calculated, measured, and weighed against personal benefit. The idea that this human had entered a dangerous asteroid field just to help someone he did not know was difficult to understand. She watched as Jake returned to the pilot's seat at the front of the cabin. His movements were calm and controlled as he checked the scanner displays. Despite herself, found her eyes following him. He did not act like the primitive creature she had been taught to expect. He seemed capable, even intelligent. "They are getting closer," Jake said quietly. "I am going to have to move the ship, hold on to something." The engines came to life, and the drifter began to drift slowly between the asteroids. Jake's hands moved across the controls with practiced skill, adjusting their course constantly to avoid the massive rocks floating around them. Held the edge of the bed and watched the view through the front window. The asteroid field was terrifying, a maze of stone and metal that could crush them in an instant. A new shape appeared on the scanner, a patrol ship moving in their direction. Jake's jaw tightened. He powered down the engines and let the drifter coast silently in the shadow of a large asteroid. The patrol ship moved closer, its searchlights sweeping the darkness. Held her breath. She could see the pirate vessel through the window now, a ugly thing covered with weapons and armor. If they were discovered, there would be no escape. The seconds stretched into minutes. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. Finally, the patrol ship turned away and continued its search in another direction. Jake let out a long breath and allowed his shoulders to relax. "That was close," he said. Realized she had been gripping the bed frame so tightly that her fingers hurt. She released her hold and tried to slow her racing heart. "You are a skilled pilot," she admitted reluctantly, "for a human." Jake smiled slightly. "Thanks, I think." The ship began moving again, slowly working its way through the asteroid field. Watched Jake work and found herself curious despite her prejudice. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "Hauling cargo in these dangerous regions, is there nothing better for humans?" Jake shrugged. "This is what I chose. I used to be a soldier, a combat medic in the Terran Defense Force. I patched up wounded men and watched too many of them die. When my service ended, I wanted a quiet life. No more fighting, no more death, just me and the stars." Was silent for a moment. She had never thought about humans having military forces or medical training. She had never thought about them at all, really. They were just background noise in the galaxy, unimportant and unremarkable. "You saved lives," she said, "as a medic." "Some of them," Jake replied, "not enough." There was pain in his voice, old and deep. Recognized it because she had heard it before in the voices of veterans who had served in distant wars. Loss was loss, no matter the species. She wanted to say something, but a warning light began to flash on the control panel. Jake leaned forward, his eyes scanning the display. "More patrol ships," he said. "3 of them coming from different directions. They are boxing us in." Felt the fear return. What do we do? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked at her with a strange light in his eyes. "We run," he said. "Hold on tight, princess. This is going to get rough." He pushed the throttle forward, and the drifter shot deeper into the asteroid field. The drifter weaved between the asteroids at dangerous speed. Jake's hands flew across the controls, making tiny adjustments every second to avoid the massive rocks that filled the space around them. Behind them, the 3 patrol ships followed, their weapons firing bright streaks of light that exploded against the asteroids. Gripped the edge of her seat and watched the chaos unfolding through the front window. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. No royal transport had ever moved like this. No pilot would have dared to fly so fast through such dangerous terrain. "This is madness," she shouted over the roar of the engines. "You will kill us both." "Maybe," Jake replied without looking at her. "But if we slow down, those pirates will definitely kill us. I prefer maybe." A large asteroid appeared directly ahead. Jake pulled hard on the controls, and the drifter rolled sideways, passing so close to the rock that could see the individual craters on its surface. One of the patrol ships behind them was not so lucky. It could not turn in time and crashed into the asteroid with a brilliant explosion. "To left," Jake said with grim satisfaction. Stared at him in disbelief. The human was actually enjoying this, or perhaps not enjoying, but alive in a way she had never seen before. His eyes were sharp and focused, his movements precise and confident. This was a man who had faced death before and learned not to fear it. The chase continued deeper into the asteroid field. Jake seemed to know every turn, every gap, every hiding spot among the rocks. When asked how he knew this place so well, he explained that he had been hauling cargo through this region for years. He knew the asteroid field like he knew the back of his hand. Another patrol ship fell behind, unable to keep up with the drifter's reckless course. But the third ship was piloted by someone skilled, someone determined. It stayed close, matching Jake's movements and continuing to fire. A blast hit the drifter's rear section. The ship shook violently, and warning lights began flashing across every panel. Jake cursed under his breath and checked the damage report. "We lost one of the stabilizers," he said. "I need to make repairs or we will not be able to maintain control much longer." "Can you fix it while flying?" asked. Jake shook his head. "No, I need to go outside." He set the ship to drift behind a cluster of asteroids that provided temporary cover from the pursuing vessel. Then he stood and began putting on a repair suit from a locker near the airlock. Watched him with growing concern. "You cannot go out there. If the pirates find us while you are outside, you will be killed." "If I do not fix the stabilizer, we will crash into an asteroid and die anyway," Jake replied calmly. "Stay here and watch the scanner. If you see them coming, call me on the radio." Before she could argue further, he sealed the helmet of his suit and stepped into the airlock. The outer door opened, and he disappeared into the void. Moved to the pilot seat and studied the scanner display. The symbols and words were in human language, but she had learned many languages during her education. She could understand enough to see the danger. The remaining patrol ship was circling around, searching for them systematically. Minutes passed slowly. Kept her eyes on the scanner, her fingers hovering over the radio button. Outside, she could hear faint sounds of metal and tools through the hull. Jake was working quickly, but would it be quick enough? The patrol ship changed direction. It was heading toward their hiding spot. "Press the radio button. They are coming. You need to get back inside now." There was no response for a moment. Then Jake's voice crackled through the speaker. "Almost done. Just 30 more seconds." The patrol ship was getting closer. Could see it now through the side window, a dark shape moving between the asteroids. 20 seconds. 15. The airlock door hissed open, and Jake rushed back inside, pulling off his helmet as he ran to the pilot's seat. He pushed aside gently and grabbed the controls just as the patrol ship spotted them. The drifter's engines roared to life and the chase began again, but something was wrong. Jake was moving slowly and noticed dark stains on his suit. Blood. "You are hurt," she said. "A piece of debris hit me while I was working," Jake replied through clenched teeth. "It is not serious. I can fly." But could see the pain in his face. The wound was worse than he admitted. She looked around the cabin and found a medical kit mounted on the wall. Without thinking, she grabbed it and opened it beside him. "Tell me what to do," she said. Jake glanced at her in surprise. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he nodded and began giving her instructions. "Clean the wound, apply the healing gel, wrap the bandage tight but not too tight." Worked with uncertain hands, following his directions as carefully as she could. She had never treated a wound before. There had always been servants and doctors to handle such things, but now there was no one else, only her. When she finished, Jake gave her a tired smile. "Thank you, Princess." looked at her hands, stained with human blood. It was red just like blood. Strange that she had never known that before. "My teachers told me humans were weak," she said quietly. "They said your kind was barely better than animals, but you saved my life, and now you fly wounded through a field of death to protect me. I do not understand." Jake focused on the controls, guiding the ship through the final stretch of the asteroid field. Ahead could see open space, clear and empty. "Humans are not weak," Jake said. "We are just different. We feel fear like everyone else, but we do not let it control us. We keep going, even when everything tells us to stop. Maybe that is our gift, or maybe it is our curse. Either way, it is who we are." They cleared the asteroid field and shot into open space, felt relief wash over her. But the feeling lasted only a moment, because waiting for them in the empty space ahead was a massive warship, dark and terrible, the flagship of Commander. A communication signal appeared on the screen. Jake opened the channel, and a cruel voice filled the cabin. "Well done, little human. You have led my prize right to me. Now surrender the princess, and I might let you live." Pirate flagship hung in space before them like a beast waiting to strike. It was enormous, covered with weapons and armor plating. Dozens of smaller ships surrounded it, forming a net that would be impossible to escape. Commander had planned this trap well. Jake stared at the warship and said nothing. His mind was racing, searching for options, but there were none. The Drifter was a cargo ship, not a warfighter. They could not run, and they certainly could not fight. Stood beside him, her face pale with fear. She had never felt so helpless in her entire life. All her royal power, all her family's wealth and influence, meant nothing out here in the darkness between stars. "You should give me to them," she said quietly. "He promised to let you go. There is no reason for both of us to die." Jake turned to look at her. There was something strange in his eyes, something she could not identify. It was not fear, though he had every reason to be afraid. It was not anger, though the situation would have justified it. It was something deeper, something that spoke of principle and conviction. "No," he said simply. Blinked. "What do you mean, no? Did you not hear me? You can save yourself." "I heard you," Jake replied, "and I said no. I did not pull you out of that escape pod just to hand you over to pirates. That is not who I am." "But you will die," insisted. "For nothing, for a stranger, for someone who has treated you with contempt since the moment she woke up." Jake smiled slightly. "You are not wrong about that last part. You have been pretty rude." Felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had been cruel to him, dismissive and insulting. Yet here he was, refusing to abandon her even when it would cost him everything. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this?" Jake was quiet for a moment. He looked out at the stars beyond the pirate fleet, thinking of things could not see. "When I was young," he said finally, "my mother used to tell me stories about heroes. Not warriors with powerful weapons, but ordinary people who chose to do what was right even when it was hard. She said that courage was not about being unafraid. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway." He turned back to, "I am afraid right now, more afraid than I have been in a long time, but I would rather die as someone my mother would be proud of than live as a coward who abandoned an innocent person to monsters." Did not know what to say. In her world, such thinking was considered foolish, even dangerous. Society taught that survival was the highest priority, that sacrifice for strangers was the act of the simple-minded. But standing here with this human, she wondered if perhaps her world had been wrong about many things. The communication channel crackled again. Commander was growing impatient. "You have 1 hour, human. After that, I will destroy your little ship and take the princess from the wreckage. Choose wisely." The channel went silent. Jake moved to a storage compartment at the back of the cabin. He began pulling out equipment and tools, spreading them across the floor. "What are you doing?" asked. "Looking for a way out," Jake replied. There has to be something we can use. Watched as he sorted through the supplies. Most of it was standard cargo equipment, useless in their situation. But then Jake stopped and picked up a small device covered in dust. "This," he said, holding it up, "this might work." "What is it?" "An old Terran emergency beacon. Standard military issue from my service days. If I can modify it to broadcast on military frequencies, it might reach a patrol. Your people must be searching for you by now." Hope flickered in his chest. "Can you do it? Can you make it work?" Jake examined the beacon carefully. "I think so, but I will need help. Someone to hold the components while I work on the circuitry." Stepped forward without hesitation. "Tell me what to do." They worked together for the next hour, side by side in the small cabin. Jake explained each step carefully and followed his instructions. It was delicate work, requiring patience and steady hands. Several times they had to start over when a connection failed or a component refused to cooperate. As they worked, they talked. Jake told her about Earth, about the green forests and blue oceans, about the small town where he grew up and the family he had left behind. Shared stories of the palace, of the endless ceremonies and the loneliness of being royalty. She admitted that despite having servants and advisors around her constantly, she had never really had a friend. "That sounds terrible," Jake said honestly. Smiled sadly. "I did not realize how terrible until now." The beacon was nearly complete when the communication channel activated again. Commander appeared on the screen, his face twisted with anger. "Time is up, human. I offered you mercy, and you rejected it. Now you will watch as my soldiers take what I want." The channel closed, and the smaller ships began moving toward the drifter. Boarding parties were being launched. Jake connected the final wire and activated the beacon. A small light blinked to show it was transmitting, sending their desperate call for help across the void. "Will it reach them in time?" asked. "I do not know," Jake admitted, "but we have done everything we can." He stood and looked around the cabin. His eyes settled on a heavy metal tool, the closest thing to a weapon available. He picked it up and tested its weight. "What are you doing?" asked, though she already knew the answer. "They will have to come through the airlock," Jake said. "It is a narrow space. I can hold them there for a while." "You cannot fight an army alone." Jake looked at her with that same strange light in his eyes, the one she had seen before. Now she understood what it was. It was determination, pure, unshakable determination. "Maybe not," he said, "but I can slow them down. Every minute I buy is another minute for that signal to travel, another minute for rescue to arrive." The sound of ships docking echoed through the hull. Heavy boots began clanging against the outer airlock door. Jake positioned himself in front of the inner door, weapon raised. He glanced back at one last time. "Stay behind me," he said. "Whatever happens, do not give up. Help is coming, you just have to believe it." The airlock door exploded inward, and the first pirate charged through. Jake met him with all the strength he had left. The first pirate was a massive creature, twice Jake's size, with thick armor and a blade in each hand. Any reasonable person would have run from such an enemy, but Jake was not feeling reasonable. He was feeling desperate, determined, and absolutely unwilling to let this monster reach the princess behind him. He swung his metal tool with all his strength and caught the pirate across the helmet. The creature stumbled backward, surprised by the force of the blow. Jake did not wait for it to recover. He struck again and again, driving the pirate back into the airlock where the narrow space prevented others from joining the fight. Watched from behind a storage container, her silver eyes wide with disbelief. She had seen soldiers train in the palace courtyards her entire life. They were graceful and deadly, moving like dancers with weapons. But this was different. This was not elegant or beautiful. This was raw, primal, and absolutely terrifying. Jake fought like a cornered animal. He had no formal technique, no refined style. He simply refused to fall. Every time a pirate struck him, he struck back harder. Every time he was pushed back, he pushed forward again. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye, and his breathing was ragged with exhaustion, but he would not stop. A second pirate managed to squeeze past the first and slashed at Jake's arm. The blade cut deep, and Jake cried out in pain. But instead of retreating, he grabbed the pirate's arm and pulled him off balance, then smashed the tool into his face. The pirate dropped to the floor and did not rise. More enemies were coming. Jake could see them crowding the airlock, waiting for their chance to overwhelm him. He knew he could not win. There were too many of them, and he was just one man. But every second he held them back was another second for the beacon signal to travel, another second of hope. The first pirate recovered and charged again. This time Jake was too slow. The creature's blade caught him across the chest, and he fell backward against the cabin wall. Pain exploded through his body, and his vision began to blur at the edges. Screamed his name. Jake looked up at the pirates advancing toward him. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arm would not obey. He was finished. He knew it. But even now, even at the end, he placed himself between the enemies and the princess. If they wanted her, they would have to step over his body. The lead pirate raised his blade for the killing blow. And then the universe changed. A massive explosion shook the drifter so hard that everyone inside was thrown to the floor. Through the front window, saw something that made her heart soar. Warships, 3 of them, dropping out of hyperspace directly on top of the pirate fleet. The golden symbols of her empire gleamed on their hulls like stars come to life. The beacon had worked, help had arrived. The pirates in the airlock hesitated, looking at each other in confusion and fear. The sound of weapons fire echoed from outside as the ships engaged the enemy. Commander's voice came through the communication system, ordering a retreat. The pirates fled, scrambling back to their ships as fast as they could. Within minutes, the drifter was empty except for and Jake. Rushed to Jake's side. He was lying against the wall, barely conscious, covered in blood and wounds. But he was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was still alive. "You did it," she whispered, taking his hand in hers. "They came, help came." Jake managed a weak smile. "Told you, do not give up." Soldiers boarded the drifter moments later. They found their princess kneeling beside a wounded human, holding his hand and crying. The soldiers stopped in confusion, unsure what to make of the scene before them. "Your Highness," the squad leader said carefully, "are you harmed? Did this human hurt you?" Looked up at him with fire in her eyes. "This human saved my life. He protected me with his own body when no one else could. He fought an army alone to give your ships time to arrive." The soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. They had never heard of such a thing. Humans were not supposed to be capable of such actions. They were supposed to be primitive and weak. "He needs medical attention immediately," commanded, her voice carrying all the authority of her royal blood. "The best doctors, the finest care. You will treat him as you would treat me. Is that understood?" The soldiers snapped to attention. Whatever their personal feelings about humans, they knew better than to disobey a direct order from their princess. Medical teams arrived and carried Jake away on a stretcher. Followed close behind, refusing to leave his side even when advisors tried to pull her away for debriefing. She stayed with him through the surgery, through the long hours of recovery, through everything. 3 weeks later, Princess Hen stood before the Senate. The great chamber was filled with the most powerful figures in the empire, all watching her with curious eyes. Rumors had spread throughout the civilization about what had happened in the asteroid field, but no one knew the full story. Told them everything. She spoke of the attack, of her rescue, of the human cargo hauler who had risked everything to save someone who had treated him with contempt. She described his courage, his determination, and his absolute refusal to abandon her even when it would have saved his own life. "We have been wrong," she declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. We have looked down on humans as lesser beings, as creatures unworthy of our respect. But I have seen what humans are truly capable of. I have seen a courage that puts our finest warriors to shame. I have seen a spirit that cannot be broken by fear or pain or impossible odds. She paused and looked at the faces before her. Some were skeptical, some were angry, but some, she could see, were beginning to understand. Jake Carter is not a soldier or a diplomat or anyone of importance by our standards. He is an ordinary human, a cargo hauler who happened to hear a distress signal. And yet he did something extraordinary. He proved that worth is not measured by species or status, but by the choices we make when everything is at stake. The chamber was silent. No one had ever heard a member of the royal family speak this way about humans. Raised her hand and the great doors of the chamber opened. Jake Carter walked in slowly, still recovering from his wounds, wearing a simple human suit. He looked uncomfortable surrounded by so much grandeur, but he held his head high. Stepped down from her platform and approached him. In her hands, she held a golden medal, the highest honor the Empire could bestow on a non-citizen. "For courage beyond measure," she said, placing the medal around his neck. "For selflessness in the face of death. For proving that heroism knows no species." Jake looked at her with those tired, kind eyes. "I just did what anyone should do." Smiled, "And that is exactly why you are remarkable." Later, after the ceremony ended and the senators departed, found Jake standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Prime sparkled below like a sea of stars. "What will you do now?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Go back to hauling cargo, I suppose. It is the only life I know." Stood beside him. "I was hoping you might consider another option. The Empire needs people who can help bridge the gap between our peoples, advisors who understand both worlds. I cannot think of anyone better qualified than you." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, that same warm, genuine smile she had first seen in the cabin of the Drifter. "I suppose I could stay for a while," he said, "see how things go." Nodded, feeling something warm in her chest, hope perhaps, or something more. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was slowly, quietly beginning to change.